Story structure. There are some common themes that you will see across most classic story structure. It's the holy grail. Story structure is what they call it. And there's one guy in particular, this Joseph Campbell. I highly suggest if this is something you're interested in, like if you're a English major or you're a video major or animation, if you're interested in any sort of narrative storytelling, and that's applicable to whatever you see yourself doing in the future, I highly suggest looking up Joseph Campbell and maybe even reading some of his books. There are other books that are abridged versions of his book. But basically, he went all around the world and all these different cultures, and he just found commonalities between basically the stories we tell as humans. Okay, generally speaking, they always have a 3-act structure. There should be a beginning, a middle, and an end. Right? Sun rises, noontime, sun sets. You would be surprised at how many, at the very least, that's what your whatever narrative you're making, at the very least, it should contain those elements. You'd be surprised as to how many students create things that's just like a thing and that's it. There's nothing like there's no introduction. It's just like thing happens and that's it. Sometimes that can work. I know we live in the times of TikTok, and YouTube Shorts and Facebook Shorts. I don't know what they're called on Facebook. My wife watches them, whatever those things are. But I know we live in those times, and snippets are good. But you want to try to implement that as much as possible. If you want to have something that's a more fulfilling piece of media. Okay, so classic story diagram. So what I want you to do is you can look at this and then watch this short. This is Presto by Pixar. To be frank, though, you could really watch any animated short by Pixar, or even some of the other ones, and they will all follow this general structure. And it's really just about where do you think those things fit. So I'm going to use basically Star Wars, we'll say, or maybe Lion King. I'm trying to think of what you guys would. I'm trying to think of like something that's like a really big movie that everybody has seen. I guess we'll use Lion King as an example. So when Lion King opens up, the first thing they do is they introduce all the characters, right? So every movie's gonna do this. They'll introduce the characters, and then they'll introduce the current situation and the rules of the world, right? So if you think about it, they have the beginning of Lion King, and it's like, oh, it's the circle of life, and there's all these things happening, and all the animals come to see the Lion King, the new cub, right? That's gonna be shown, right? And they all have respect for him. And there's that whole thing where Mufasa talks to Simba and tells him, like, we eat the gazelle eats the grass, and the grass eats us, and yada, yada, yada. So you understand kind of what the rules are, how things are, what all the characters are. They also introduce some conflicts with Scar, right? So from there, what will happen is, and generally in the story, is there'll be conflict and development until you get to the resolution. But in the meantime, as far as the character arc is concerned, the character will have setbacks, foreshadowing, and various developments, things that they will have to overcome. Okay, so in the case of our hero is Simba, right? He learns he has to be king. He doesn't want to really be that type of king, and then his dad dies, right? So usually what ends up happening as well is that the hero will be called to action, and they will be forced to go to a magical world, right? So if this was, again, if we did Star Wars, right? He starts off, they explain what the lightsabers are, blah, 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 when he meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, so on and so forth, right? And there's all these things. But then he has to go to a magical world. He has to go out into space, right? He was a normal guy, and then he has to go into the magical world. For Lion King, the magical world doesn't have to be literally magical. The magical world is when he goes to the jungle, where he meets Timon and Pumbaa, right? And so he goes there and he learns Kuna Matata. He does all these things, and he has various setbacks and things that aren't that great. And he has to overcome all these different obstacles. Okay, and every time they come over to the obstacles, they learn from them, and it benefits them until eventually they get to the point where they can then reach the epiphany. So in Lion King, if you remember, Simba realizes that he didn't kill his father, and that he does have to take the mantle, and then he overthrows basically Scar, right? And then he, the resolution is they end the character arc, and he ends up having a kid with Nala, so on and so forth, right? In Star Wars, right? He realizes that his dad is is alive. Um, that he learns how to become a Jedi, right? And he does the super shot or whatever and kills the moon. And it's the same plot for the other two movies. But there's always that end of the thing, and then they'll show some sort of like how the world is changed and it's better. Very often there'll be rain during those as well to show a cleansing. Like they do it in Lion King, for example. There's like a rain, and then everything comes back to normal. And they're like, oh, good, the world's somehow going to be better now that there's a lion there, and the lions will be less hungry. But that also means that now all the hyenas are going to be starving again, right? Because they were clearly, I feel like they were just kind of crapped on. But anyway, yeah. So that's the idea, is that you will generally see that. And what you do is watch this, and then you'll see, like in the beginning, they establish some rules. You'll see who the characters are, how things work, because it deals with magic in this specific one. And then there'll be like just worse and worse and worse and worse things as they just kind of escalate until eventually it comes to an epiphany, a climax happens, and there's a resolution. All right. But generally, that's kind of what you want as far as your story is concerned. Another fun exercise that you can do is the story spline exercise. So this is something I would do in class. But basically, you would ask one person to say, you prompt them with once upon a time, and then they'll say, there lived a squirrel. And every day, and then someone will go, that squirrel goes and gets nuts. And then you'll say, until one day, there weren't any nuts in the trees. And then because of that, the squirrel had to go to another forest. And because of that, he met other squirrels. And because of that, he got married until one day, finally, he has children. And since that day, he has lots of kids. And the moral story is, go out and venture into the world or something, right? I didn't do a very good job. But usually you try to be a little more clever and funny with it. But the idea is that if you follow this, it will give you your exposition, inciting incidents, progressive complication, crisis, climax, and resolution, and then the general theme. Okay. So if you can make your story sort of fit this sort of idea, then that would work. Now that only really works if you're doing like something within like they say short films should be 7 minutes or under, at least animated films. Once it gets past 7 minutes, it becomes a little too long. Really, I would say for a student, you want your short film to be probably about 2.5 minutes. But as for projects and stuff, I would say you want to do it like 10 seconds. That's what we're shooting for. Okay. Another thing I do want to talk about is interactive storytelling. So what that means is that when you are watching something, when you're interacting with any sort of art, it's a conversation. You bring your own experiences into what the audience or user or viewer, they bring their own influences to the work. And so depending on what their background is and who they are, they're going to infer certain things about your work. So like someone who, there might be a picture of a dog, but if there's somebody who got bit by a dog, that's going to elicit a much different emotion than somebody who is a foster dog person, right? It's going to be different. But what you have to realize is that when the audience, particularly for motion media, so games and otherwise, is that the idea is they're supposed to have a point of empathy. They're supposed to really believe that like they are the character and that they are in the moment. They're in the picture. I'm sure if you played video games, right, you will get like really excited. If you play a scary game, you might get kind of scared. I mean, you ever watch a scary movie and you get like, oh, you get a jump scare or something's kind of creepy or whatever, and you're a little bit scared afterwards? It's completely ridiculous. You're just watching like video of something. But because you are engaged with it, it makes you feel like you are part of it. And that's a really important part of filmmaking, of storytelling. A really great example of this is The Great Train Robbery, which was, I think it was the first like major, it was one of the first like movies ever made. The final shot is this guy right here that you see shooting at the camera. When they played this in the film, and obviously these people were not, film was like a new media back then. everyone jumped on the floor and they screamed out, and they were all really scared because they thought he was shooting at them. And that's the kind of thing that I'm getting at, is that basically your audience should feel sad and happy and angry and scared and all of the emotions, because they are active participants in the media. So what I suggest, because the next thing you're gonna be doing is gonna just be making a simple narrative animation. This week you're gonna create a storyboard, so it's just the basic frames. And then next week you'll just do simple animations to kind of make it a little bit more, a little more interesting. The best thing to do really is like the easy gag, where what you do is you set up a situation. Then you have some sort of struggle that anticipates a really obvious result, and then give a different result than what was expected. It's pretty universally funny. I love this right here. Like, this is one a great example. So it looks like, see how his thumb is on the nail, and you think that he's going to hit his thumb. So he's like, and then he hits his eye instead, right? Still got hurt. It still made sense within the situation. You know what I mean? But it's hilarious. And that's universally funny. It works across all cultures. So that's a really good way of presenting a good, simple story. It's going to be really hard to make someone cry in 10 seconds, right? Unless it's like someone punching kittens or something. No one's going to really care. And if it was me, I wouldn't, because I don't like cats. So, but you can make someone laugh and chuckle. Doing these small little gags are really great for demo reels when you're trying to apply for jobs, because you can put the entirety of it and they can see how your storytelling works, that you can deliver humor, it's easy to have a complete product within your demo reel. So you could have a bunch of these 10-second clips, as opposed to cutting out 20 seconds out of a 15-minute movie out of context. It doesn't work as well. So these like little easy gags are a great way of showing your work, and also just flexing your abilities. So one of the things, I'm not expecting you guys to do this, is that you would write whatever work project you work on. Usually you would write a treatment. So treatment more or less is a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs, that just describe what the story is. We don't write full scripts. So a script is meant to be, usually it's very dialogue heavy, and animation is not. And a script will be long. So if you have, for every minute, there should be 1 page in a script. So if it's a 60-minute movie, it'll be 60 pages. A treatment is just a really brief description of it, because our stuff is more visually based. We do most of our storytelling, our writing, I'm using air quotes right now, in the storyboard process. We'll write out a general idea, and then the storyboard artist will flesh that out. For example, I always thought this was interesting. If you ever watch like a SpongeBob episode, they actually write a lot of cartoons do this, but they don't do it as much as they used to. But they'll have like the writer of the episode, the director, maybe like animation supervisor. When you look at an episode, when they write out the script for it, it is 1 sentence. So every episode, the writer writes 1 sentence. It's like SpongeBob goes to the store and buys popsicles. Then the storyboard artists go from there. The whole rest of the story is done through the storyboard. They only have a single sentence to work with, which tells you how important it is. For example, the first Disney animated feature film that even had a script was Beauty and the Beast. All the ones before that were storyboarded. I mean, that movie was also storyboard, but they did actually have a script. Mostly the modern movies will have scripts at this point as well, but the storyboard is really where most of the writing is completed. So I'm not expecting you guys to do a treatment for this, but you might want to just on your own. You can write out a little treatment so you know what you're thinking, to get the ideas down. It's a good idea to just write out treatments all the time, and then you'll have a whole slew of different ideas that you can always use in order to make something new.